Hi, everyone. Looks like there's some folks who have joined, and we'll give it another minute to let other folks join the call today. Okay, looks like we have enough of a quorum today. I'd like to kick off the call. Thank you all for joining the Parataxis Korea Q3 earnings and business update call being held on Monday, November the 17th. My name is Andrew Kim. I am the CEO of Parataxis Korea, and I have the pleasure of walking you through our update call today. Now, before we begin, I'd like to walk you through a couple disclaimers for today's presentation. Mainly, this presentation is for informational purposes only and does not constitute a solicitation or offer to buy or sell securities of the company. And certain commentary may include forward-looking statements around expectations, which can be impacted by unknown risks. If you would like further detail, I'd encourage you to refer to the full disclaimers on the slide, which will be available on Parataxis Korea's website, where this presentation will be uploaded after the call. Now, I'd like to go through today's agenda. This is Parataxis Korea's first quarterly earnings call since the original August transaction closing. For the first few months, we've been heads down executing the business plan, and today we're excited to host this first call with our shareholders, partners, and other stakeholders. Now for the agenda. First, for those who are getting up to speed with the story, we'll go over Parataxis Korea and a summary of what we're trying to build here. Then we'll look at Q3 financial results, key Bitcoin treasury metrics in the first quarter post-transaction closing. Then we'll dive into our recent business expansion into Bitcoin mining, including some additional detail into our growth plans there. And finally, I'll go into our 2026 outlook for the business, including adjacent longer-term market opportunities as we wrap up Q4 and head into 2026 annual planning. So, Parataxis Korea. Parataxis Korea is a first-of-its-kind public Bitcoin treasury and mining platform listed in South Korea on the KOSDAQ. As seen in the Parataxis name, the firm is backed and operationally managed by Parataxis Holdings, a crypto asset manager based in the US. Regarding the change of control transaction with the predecessor company Bridge Buyout Therapeutics, on June 2025, Parataxis Holdings announced a definitive agreement to invest 25 billion Korean won into Bridge Buyout Therapeutics, which would provide Parataxis Holdings with a controlling interest in the company. The existing management team would be retained to run core business operations, with myself appointed as CEO and representative director, and Edward Chin of Parataxis Holdings as chairman. Regarding the transaction, this was really a perfect fit of two partners. After conducting a long 12-month process of sourcing, evaluating, and diligencing dozens of various companies, we found Bridge Bio to fit all of the criteria, both financial as well as qualitative, for what we believe to be a winning strategy. In August of 2025, we successfully concluded our special shareholders meeting and closing of the transaction, in which we formally rebranded the business to Parataxis Korea. For more information, please visit our new website at parataxis.co.kr. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with Parataxis, I'd like to provide a bit more context on who we are and what we do. Parataxis is a US-based multi-strategy hedge fund that trades and operates across the full spectrum of the Bitcoin capital markets. Out of an estimated several thousand crypto hedge funds in the US, Parataxis has one of the longest standing track records of successfully navigating several market cycles, and one of the few funds that manage institutional capital, including that of US public pension funds. The Parataxis team consists of a wide range of investment and trading professionals, each with a unique specialization in digital assets, for example, ranging from fundamental research to quant and systematic trading, but all with classically trained Wall Street backgrounds. Parataxis's businesses include, number one, its multi-strategy hedge fund, in which the flagship fund, the Absolute Return Fund, was a winner of the HFM Best Digital Asset Fund for 2024. We operate a Bitcoin-backed credit lending business under the Yield Fund, a Bitcoin mining business, which our experience in mining dates back to the 2022-2023 timeframe. And lastly, a derivatives business that includes Bitcoin-denominated yield separately managed accounts and other emerging Bitcoin derivatives such as hash rate in the mining sector. Now, I'm sure many of you will be familiar with this slide. Now, to briefly go over the Bitcoin treasury model. Whoever has been following the sector and model closely will already be familiar with these. What I like to focus on is really the compartmentalization of the balance sheet side, which we'll call capital structure strategies, from the organic yield side, which is the actual operational side that drives organic Bitcoin yield. We're firm believers that the organic incremental yield opportunity is where management teams can drive sustainable NAV premiums, and the steady state of where Bitcoin treasuries are similar to other sectors such as PIGs that trade at various premiums to book values based on the track record of value creation by the management team. Now, where does that NAV premium potential come from? There are several different drivers. Number one is accessibility. This is a primary and most simple reason for investors that want exposure to Bitcoin through a traditional security vehicle. This includes institutional investors that are constrained by investment mandates and other pools of capital that are natural buyers of a Bitcoin-linked equity instrument. Number two is a volatility premium. By providing Bitcoin exposure through a corporate balance sheet ownership, Bitcoin treasury companies can issue various securities across the capital structure, such as equity, debt, convertible debt, and preferred equity that specifically tailors volatility profiles to certain investors. This further expands the addressable investor base for Bitcoin. Number three is a Bitcoin yield premium. Bitcoin yield is a concept of growing the amount of Bitcoin exposure held by shareholders in an accretive manner measured by Bitcoin per share growth. This is analogous to something like EPS growth in traditional equity markets. This can come from accretive capital raising activity, but also with organic Bitcoin yield sources from a core business. This is where I get really excited because this is where I think Parataxis Korea is truly building a differentiated platform. We'll go into those strategic pillars later. And lastly is the strategic premium. We firmly believe that we're in the early innings of this entire trend. Bitcoin is just over 15 years old. The institutional wave is just starting, and the South Korean market is ripe for an institutional grade Bitcoin vehicle to express its exposure. We believe given the early innings of this trend, we'll continue to see strategic premium placed around the right geographic market, which we think is Korea, and value add management teams. And if I think about the most compelling attributes of Parataxis Korea, we can really break it down into these four highlights. First and foremost, Parataxis Korea is a vertically integrated platform backed and directly managed by an institutional asset manager in Parataxis. Based on our experience since starting in 2019, the largest pools of capital, when ready to allocate to Bitcoin, will look for firms with a multi-year, multi-cycle track record. We aim to be that for Parataxis Korea. On top of that, regarding the vertical integration, marrying both the balance sheet side and the operating side of the business, we aim to build the most compelling Bitcoin vehicle available on the equity markets in Korea. Number two is a structural, operational, and first mover advantage in this huge market. As a first institutionally backed Bitcoin treasury and mining platform, we have a clear early mover position and timing advantage in executing and navigating a complex commercial, regulatory, and counterparty environment in executing a proper digital asset treasury. In the first few months since closing the transaction, we've executed on everything we have telegraphed to the market, which we will be going over shortly later in this presentation. Number three, there's an attractive market in Korea with tremendous tailwinds. We're in the early stages of this top global market with clear Bitcoin demand as the Korean won being the second largest Bitcoin trading pair and crypto trading volumes often surpassing those of the local equity market. And even more importantly, there's extreme structural benefits on the supply side for a trusted traditional vehicle to be that way investors can put on their Bitcoin exposure, both through a treasury platform as well as a mining business. And lastly, there's a very aligned management team and control investor that's properly vetted and structured governance, control, and risk management, and is also a proven operator with a long-standing track record of managing risk. Most importantly, in this area, Paratax is able to port over many of the proprietary learnings, infrastructure, and counterparty relationships of a proven US-based asset manager that has had their operational custody and trading processes vetted by institutions such as US pension funds. And finally, there's a deep, consistent involvement from Parataxis with sound governance and independent board members tailored for the Korean institutional market. One thing I'm particularly proud of in building this business is the board that we have thoughtfully vetted and assembled around our team. This board is specifically tailored for the institutional Korean market and has extensive experience across institutional asset managers, the digital asset industry, and securities regulation and policy. With two representative directors from the Parataxis side, and Edward Chin and myself, we bring the entire backing and resources from Parataxis in the US. James Lee is the third inside director and continues to be active and engaged in the business. And our two outside independent board members include Chungi Hong of Logo Fund Labs and Anthony Choi of Shin & Kim. Rounding out the leadership is Hyunir Hwang of Shin & Kim, who has extensive experience in both securities markets regulation, formerly at the FSC himself, as well as digital assets regulation as a thought leader in the space. Now, shifting our attention to the next section of this call, I'd like to jump right into Q3 and our recent highlights. So since closing of the transaction, I'd like to walk through the key highlights of what we accomplished at Parataxis Korea. Number one, we successfully rebranded and created a leadership team around the business. Number two, we successfully have scaled our treasury with over 150 Bitcoin accumulated. We've built a substantial Bitcoin treasury through disciplined accumulation and rigorous execution, custody, and counterparty risk management. Number three is we were successfully able to raise and close a 10 billion Korean won equity capital raise in September. This equity raise was supported by both Korean and US institutional investors, and proceeds were used to further accelerate our Bitcoin treasury expansion. Number four is our strategic vertical integration via our US mining acquisition. This was announced in September and recently closed in October of this year, in which we acquired just over 1,100 ASIC miners, producing a quarter of an exahash of hash rate, and is expected to generate 60% contribution margins to the business. And lastly, we've been very active in thought leadership and our industry presence locally here in South Korea. I've had the honor and privilege of being invited as a keynote speaker and panel speaker at various Bitcoin conferences, including BTCon in Seoul and Korea Blockchain Week, both held in Seoul in September. And this underscores Parataxis Korea's role in institutionalizing Bitcoin treasuries in South Korea. And with those highlights done, I'd like to turn it over to our results on scaling our Bitcoin holdings. So I'd like to walk through the first few months of our Bitcoin accumulation journey here. Not shown in this chart is really the operational process that's needed to set up a public company grade system. And so since the closing in August, we have carefully vetted, stood up, tested, and executed a public company grade treasury operation with leading custody, audit, and legal partners. With the first purchase in August of around 15 Bitcoin, we have quickly scaled to accumulate 158 Bitcoin as of October month end, with 136 Bitcoin accumulated as of Q3 end. While this is clearly at early stage scale figures, we expect to be aggressive in our approach, given the magnitude of the market opportunity. With a moderate beginning Bitcoin balance starting base and intentionally capacity constrained sizing, we believe that the Bitcoin growth trajectory for Parataxis Korea is as compelling today as ever. Now to go over a few key metrics in the business for Q3. You'll see that financials were filed publicly late last week where investors can see our detailed financial statements. I'll note that this quarter has some noise in it, given that the numbers are post-closing of the Parataxis transaction that occurred mid-quarter. Here, we highlight the key figures as it relates to the treasury strategy and core balance sheet, share count, and Bitcoin key performance indicators. We ended Q3 with 23 billion Korean won in cash and cash equivalents, 136 Bitcoin worth 23 billion Korean won, and a total corporate treasury value of around 45 billion Korean won. Now, looking below at our share count detail, accounting for the conversion of the small convertible bond piece in place, we started Q3 with 89 million diluted shares from the original Parataxis transaction. The increase of shares in Q3 to 94 million are attributable to the September equity follow-on of 10 billion Korean won that closed at attractive terms. Now, looking to the right side of the page, when we look at the monthly ramp of Bitcoin treasury on the right side, tracked with the diluted share count over that period, we get to our key metric of Bitcoin per share. This will be the primary measurement and KPI we're focused on as a management team. And if you see here, from a starting Bitcoin per share of 17 sats per share, that is a fraction of a Bitcoin unit measurement. When we first educated our first Bitcoin purchase in August, we have delivered 10x Bitcoin per share growth to around 170 sats per share today, as of October 2025. As we continue executing over the coming quarters, including some of the expansion areas in mining and other organic yield sources, please keep a lookout for further detail around these metrics. To those already closely following the digital asset treasury industry, there are many industry metrics, such as MNAV, out there that are primarily used in benchmarking purposes. While I'll notice that these metrics are helpful in framework, many of these metrics are lacking in nuance and understanding of the return and value drivers of a successful digital asset treasury. For example, key factors like geographic market, go-forward growth opportunity, and organic yield levers are all critical variables we have honed in as a management team that require a more nuanced approach in evaluating. For now, we are comfortable committing to Bitcoin per share as a core metric we report on externally, and will continue to build out what we believe are the best KPIs to measure our unique business model as both the Bitcoin treasury and a platform operating business. Now, I'd like to turn our attention to the mining business, which I'm incredibly excited to talk about, and I'll briefly go over the transaction. Parataxis Korea announced the acquisition of a US-based Bitcoin mining infrastructure through an asset or purchase agreement, and the transaction closed recently on October 31st, 2025. With this transaction, Parataxis Korea establishes the first public Bitcoin miner listed in South Korea. The acquired assets of the purchase include just over 1,100 next-generation ASIC miners. These are newer generation miners that are highly efficient. They're generating 224 petahash of hash rate and operating on just under 4 megawatts of energy. Aside from the strategic rationale of this acquisition for the broader platform, even as a standalone financial investment, this is a very attractive acquisition. All in, we expect our investment to be recouped within 1 year, and continue to look at extremely attractive hosting rates based in Texas, which have some of the lowest power rates globally. And so with the closing of this transaction, Parataxis Korea expects to generate just substantial revenue and profits for fiscal year 2026 and onwards, which will satisfy exchange listing standards and mitigate any concerns around that area. And to quickly go over especially why we're particularly excited for this transaction and new business opportunity is really looking at the strategic benefit of a Bitcoin-based operating business that employs a growth-oriented treasury strategy. The origins of Parataxis Korea started by being the first institutionally backed Bitcoin treasury company in South Korea. And we're very proud to announce that Parataxis Korea is also now the first publicly listed Bitcoin miner in South Korea as well. Key structural advantages as a Bitcoin treasury company. There are certain key structural advantages of being a vertically integrated Bitcoin mining company. Number one is the ability to produce Bitcoin at a deep discount with an average production cost per Bitcoin of less than $50,000. And there's an extremely effective attractive financial profile with these input costs. Mining assets are expected to generate significant revenue as a core operating business with industry-leading 60% plus EBITDA margins, and is expected to provide Parataxis Korea with a recurring high-margin source of Bitcoin cash flows with significant operating leverage to underlying Bitcoin prices. And to reiterate that, Bitcoin mining is one of the few business models in the world that have natural margin expansion with rising Bitcoin price. Most other Korean won or US-based businesses lose Bitcoin purchasing power over time as Bitcoin price has risen. And so with that mining acquisition announced, I think when you look at the business right now, you can think about, look at our future roadmap and various levers in our driving our growth. So if you look at our business now, I largely categorize into three core pillars of Parataxis Korea today. Those key pillars are Bitcoin mining, capital markets, and active treasury management strategies. These are all businesses we currently operate in today or have the operational capacity to execute on today. On the Bitcoin mining side, regardless of capital markets conditions, we will be mining Bitcoin consistently at attractive below market production rates day in and day out. On the capital market side, we will continue to be opportunistic in leveraging our capital structure responsibly in ways that accrete BTC value for our shareholders. With a primary equity-based balance sheet today, there is a lot of optionality and white space opportunity in tapping other instruments such as convertible debt or mezzanine instruments like preferred equity. And finally, active trading and treasury management. Given our roots and DNA as a crypto hedge fund, please keep a close eye out on this area of the market. We believe the next highly sought after differentiator for treasury companies will be able to create a productive treasury that is actively generating yield in a risk-adjusted manner. Now, looking over at our 2026 outlook, you'll see here that the first 3 points of our growth levers for the longer term really into 2026 are the three pillars of our core strategy above. And then a common question I typically get from biotech investors is, what will be the net proceeds from any licensing or monetization events of the legacy BridgeBio assets? And so on that front, any potential monetization event, potentially in 2026 or thereafter, will be used, the net proceeds will be used to further accelerate our Bitcoin treasury strategy. I think at this point in time, management has decided that that's the best use of incremental capital in terms of our opportunities today. And lastly, I'm excited to share with you some of the new adjacent business areas that we've been thinking about. We're constantly evaluating new and exciting ways to pursue large adjacent markets for growth. And some of these markets that we're quite interested in today and we'll be doing further research on are energy and data center infrastructure, as you quickly see the worlds of Bitcoin mining and data center investments for AI converging. There's Bitcoin decentralized finance, something that we're quite familiar with on the fund side of the business, as well as institutional services as the institutional market for Korea continues to open up. And that concludes our prepared slides for today. I think to conclude, I thought it would also be great to just briefly go over some highlight slides from my prior presentation, which really helps synthesize the three most important questions I think investors should be asking themselves. Number one, why Bitcoin? Number two, why now? And number three, why Korea? So why Bitcoin? Simply put, Bitcoin is the best performing asset class by a wide margin. This is true over a 5, 10-year, 15-year period. And it's our sound belief that we're still in the early stages of adoption. If you look at the institutionalization of most other asset classes, Bitcoin is following a very similar trajectory and is emerging as an alternative asset class with a total addressable market size potential that is far greater than the market value of Bitcoin today. And why now? Well, simply put, the value of Bitcoin today is largely being driven by institutional adoption. The time is now for the institutional era for Bitcoin. We think that strategy and the Bitcoin ETF by BlackRock has validated this demand. And the growth of corporate adoption is the biggest trend in Bitcoin over the last couple of years. And lastly, why Korea? Well, there's tremendous demand for digital assets in Korea as a leader in the space. You couple this with the Korean won being, the second largest trading pair for Bitcoin globally, and even more importantly, structural supply side constraints that leave institutions sidelined. We believe that the setup and market opportunity in Korea is the single most attractive opportunity globally, and we continue to plan to execute on our plans for prepared taxes in Korea. Now, with that being said, this concludes the prepared Q3 earnings presentation. During the registration process, we also asked registrants to submit pre-submitted questions. We've carefully selected questions that were equally representative of all types of questions submitted. I'll go over those questions currently. The first question we received was related to our financial listings outlook, particularly around whether the underwatch category will be removed and the path forward to a resolution. I'll say that regarding any concerns around delisting risks, those I'll be very clear today. Delisting risks are not a concern for the business. This was already thoughtfully vetted and diligenced during our acquisition process with Big Four and legal counsel during our due diligence. With the path to revenue recognition from our operating business, such as Bitcoin mining going forward, we expect to meet revenue requirements and other tests, including market cap-based tests that impact our listing standing. While we fully expect to revenue recognition and removal of the designation by March 2027, we continue to have an active dialogue with relevant parties for a potential sooner date. We'll continue to keep the market updated on any future developments here. The second question is around the growth model for treasury and mining. What are your funding sources for additional Bitcoin accumulation, and what are your plans to minimize shareholder dilution? I'll say the growth model will largely leverage the three pillars of our operating strategy today, lined up in these slides previously. That's Bitcoin mining, capital markets, and active treasury trading and management. Regarding dilution, we will absolutely be cognizant of the dilution in share count and are considering instruments such as convertible bonds as part of our strategy. I will say, regarding debt and convertible bonds, part of this strategy involves properly sequencing our financial instruments. And so if you notice, most of our capital today is mostly equity funded, which was a clear strategic decision that we made as a business. This allows us to be more aggressive down the road on things like convertible debt or preferred equity that are further up the capital structure. And while share issuance is one consideration as relates to dilution, I want to reiterate that our primary metrics being Bitcoin per share can also be accretive even with the further issuance of shares in the right market environment. Number 3, question around mining and the revenue model. Can DATs and mining models produce accounting recognizable revenue and profit in Korea? Around the mining business, what is the realistic mining profitability, power cost strategy, and execution plan? Regarding DATs are more of a balance sheet metric of how much digital assets a business will hold on its balance sheet. So that's less revenue recognition applicable. I'd say for the mining business, we do have a path to recognize revenue. We're extremely excited about that. We have vetted this with our auditors, and we plan to first record our first Bitcoin mining revenue sometime during Q4. With this business, we look forward to not only growing our Bitcoin treasury, but also our Bitcoin operating revenue and profits of the core business. Regarding mining, mining is a highly competitive but inefficient market. So power costs and competitive ASIC procurement costs are base level table stakes. And beyond that, having deep relationships with trusted counterparties, hosting providers, and ASIC manufacturers, which takes years to build, is critical. With attractive acquisition prices of the ASICs that we acquired and below market rates of power that we're negotiating at the 5 cents per kilowatt hour range, we expect mining to be highly profitable, contributing around 60% EBITDA margins to the overall business. Number 4 is what's management's commitment to improve foreign and institutional investor participation and investor relations frequency. In regards for IR communications, we will continue to hold quarterly earnings calls for the public, this being the first of our routine quarterly calls cadence. And we plan to be further more active in physical in-person events and more actively engaging our shareholders in an ad hoc fashion. So please keep a lookout for more events on the horizon. There will be a lot of more shareholder engagement events to look forward to. Number 5, what is the concrete timeline for Parataxis Holdings NASDAQ SPAC merger? How will the structure relate to Parataxis Korea regarding ownership, linkage, or subsidiary relationship? I'll say as it relates to the transaction, the pending transaction based in the US with regards to Parataxis Holdings, due to regulatory constraints, I'm not at the liberty to speak about the Parataxis Holdings SPAC transaction. To be abundantly clear, I'm not an employee of Parataxis Holdings anymore, although I was previously a partner at Parataxis Capital. And though our firms hold a very close relationship, particularly at the board level, I am fully a sole employee of Parataxis Korea, and my fiduciary duty is first and foremost to Parataxis Korea shareholders. That being said, Parataxis Korea in the US is clearly heavily invested in Parataxis Korea and is fully aligned with Parataxis Korea shareholders' interests. And lastly, the last question I had was the status update on any asset sale discussions for the legacy pipeline. On this topic, I do get this question very frequently from investors, particularly those who were previously invested in the former BridgeBio business. I will say that James Lee and senior members of his team continue to evaluate the best strategic alternatives for the biotech portfolio, particularly the BBT 877 assets. As mentioned previously, any monetization event will further be used to invest in the new Bitcoin treasury strategy going forward, and is a conscious decision by management team to where the best use of incremental dollars are. Given that we're in growth mode, we will continue to look to scale the treasury. However, potential biotech proceeds will be what I call a surprise upside case that is not expected in our base case expectations for the business. And so that wraps up the pre-submitted Q&A questions. And to wrap it up, I'd like to notify participants that this officially concludes our Q3 earnings update and investor Q&A section. I'm incredibly proud and excited of what we have to bring to market, and we're extremely thankful every day for the support of our shareholders, partners, employees, and the broader community. These slides, including a Korean translated version and recording of today's call, will be uploaded to our website at parataxis.co.kr shortly after today. Thank you to everyone who has dialed in today, and have a wonderful rest of your day.